A population, doomed, lingering at the cusp of chaos and devastation. My residence in this town was not a lengthy one. I didn't spend the first stages of my life here, yet at the same time, all I can remember is the life I have led within these weathered walls. All I knew was that my existence was a dust mote floating within a vast galaxy, too insignificant to save the town, yet too apathetic to abandon it. So it was no surprise when I believed that they were mistaken. When a plethora of hands shoved me toward the center of the town square, spouting nonsense about me being some hero, I shouted, "You're mistaken," and they said, "If only we were." With exquisite detail, the eldest of the town wove a story of a hero who would travel to the ends of the world to gain the ink of self-confidence, the only thing that could restore the town to its former glory. A voluminous dose of anxiety had bloomed within me, drowning my chest in disbelief, crushing my ribcage with a gravitational force beyond measure. Meekly, I accepted my fate, and took along my pen to act as a weapon for the journey ahead.
The first steps of my journey led me to a human swamp. Everything was irregular, the vegetation in masses of disarray, a setting of the utmost discombobulation. How was I going to be able to fight in this environment? That was when the earth shook, and a morphed form rose out of the muddy ground. An uneven form loomed before me, a creature far from majestic, composed of the remnants of uneaten meals and the odd shapes of culinary paraphernalia. It charged towards me in the most irregular fashion conceivable.
So, the first skill I learned was agility and adaptability, and constantly our year-long project forced us to adapt to many different environments. Frequently, we visited KCC, where we attended cooking boot camps, and through these sessions, personally, I felt myself growing as a learner, because prior to being introduced to this environment of the culinary arts, the mindset that I carried was not suited for the tedious tasks which chefs could easily execute, or the sense of awareness that you had to maintain when you're inside a kitchen in order to succeed when you're cooking the meal. So when I went to KCC, or every time we went as we progressed through the year, I had to remove the studious academic area, which I love to confine my mind to, and I had to apply it to this new field of learning. And the thing we learned about cooking was you have to meticulously plan everything out, yet at the same time, even though with all that you have all that planning, you still have to be able to retain the sense of awareness of your surroundings, because many unpredictable things may occur. So, for example, during the MP Iron Chef event, I was a sanitation worker, and what I was supposed to do was not touch the food and monitor the organization and cleanliness of our station. So, however, during the event, I had to assist many of my group members with food preparatory tasks, so that goes to say that you really have to expect the unexpected when you're in the kitchen or in any environment, really.
I entered a village. Chilled by the absence of residents, I peered inside the lone construction who had most likely been houses prior to the abandonment of the village. A wave of something alike to sorrow swept over me, as assumed visuals of the fate that had befallen the village danced through my mind. What was it? What horrid catastrophe could have forced an entire population out of its home? Suddenly I saw it, the creature, its beady eyes directed towards mine, the hawk who had run everyone out. Muscles rippled across all four legs, colored so brightly red that it almost seemed to burn my eyes. I looked on trembling, and with a deathly shriek it charged towards me, propelled by a fiery rage.
So the second skill that I observed during the length of the project, of our Animal Farm Whiteboard project, was being able to make inferences and draw conclusions. So what we had to do was, in our humanities class, we needed to read Animal Farm by George Orwell. And this was an allegorical retelling of the events which transpired during the Soviet era. So the reason why I made my villain a red pig was because in the story, the pig Napoleon is, we see him as the antagonist because he is representative of Joseph Stalin during the Soviet era. So in order to gain a full understanding of which historical event the story was referencing, occasionally we would need to take a part of the story, isolate it and subject it to analyzation, because a lot of times it was hard to grasp certain details when you're looking at the whole story. So, such as when we needed to explain how the tale of Boxer impacted the reader, especially, and helped to further emphasize Orwell's caution against tyranny. So, in order to further elaborate on the topic, we needed to remove the elements of the story which were tied to Boxer. And Boxer in the story, he was representative of the working class or the proletariat, and not the proletariat, the working class. And to further justify, and he was constantly mistreated by Napoleon, and Napoleon was, and since he was representative of Joseph Stalin, we could easily see that Boxer was affected in this way that kind of made us sympathize with Boxer, or because Boxer wasn't a malicious character, he wasn't even that smart, and he always dedicated himself to the prospect of animalism. So it made us realize how tyranny can affect a population or a leader.
The forest lay still, as if it were aware that the weight of the cosmos lay above it. A fire appeared before me as I walked, and the twinkling stars, which had previously been the only source of light, were shouldered out and replaced with this newfound brightness. The fire emitted a glow like nothing I had ever witnessed before. Its alluring light illuminated the four comely faces of women, no, actually girls, whom I had never seen before. I approached them, and after some looks of curiosity and a timid introduction, I had been accepted into their circle. They welcomed me cordially, claiming that they, alike to me, were undergoing a journey of trials. All four stories different, yet now had been interwoven into one. By daybreak we were on foot again, voyaging deeper and deeper into the thickening forest. However, the tranquil refuge that I had found in the company of my warm companions soon dissipated into an arid desert of tension and disquiet. Words which had been previously embraced the listener became whispers coated in venom. Sentences morphed into shouts, and shouts escalated into livid violence. It was as if some unseen force was destroying our companionship at the core, some puppeteer of malign intent cunningly utilizing its sorcery to burn apart our friendship.
So, the reason why I made my villain a puppeteer was because in our group, beginning the year-long project, while we were all excited to find that all the girls in our previous MPX group had accumulated into one group, we found that there was we found that multiple issues would arise with the way we interacted with each other. So, which is why, we didn't hate each other or anything, we weren't enemies, but, sometimes we would just go, immediately run into, conflicts with each other. So, which is why I use this unknown force or puppeteers to represent our aggressive interactions. So, harsh words and raised voices were common during guild days, and the label bossy was thrown around quite a bit, along with a bunch of snarky comments, supplemented with the occasional slur. And personally, my issues with the group was not as aggressive as the ones which they had with each other. When they would speak, when I had an idea or had an opinion, I would minimize it and quiet it instead of voicing it with vigor and confidence like the rest of my group members were doing. However, during the second semester, we all began to realize that everyone's opinion was still valid and deserving of respect, and our discussions had changed from these combative interactions into a tranquil area of productivity.
The weaver was a creature born of gluttony and greed, a human who shared the anatomy of a spider from the midsection downwards, a gross combination which was worthy of provoking revulsion amongst multitudes. Its rank odor smelled of the pollution of overcrowded metropolitan settings. If anything was worse than the stench which she emitted, it was the ghastly smile which had frozen itself across her pinched face.
So let me explain this villain, because I know that it's really hard to understand. So This villain's entire incentive is to take a piece of territory and smother it with her webs. Much like how, not intentionally, when I'm given a piece of paper, I tend to suffocate it in words. And this leads us to my fourth skill, which is being able to use effective writing despite having a limited amount of words. So in our humanities class, we participated in the creation of a timeline of World War II events. And what we were supposed to do was take in a specific event of World War II and write a narrative through the eyes of a historical figure who was there and who held the most influence over that event. So I chose the Battle of Midway, and I wrote through the eyes of Admiral Raymond Hayes Bruins. And throughout the year, I found when I create narratives, I tend to make them overflowing with words and phrases and sentences, and it just becomes this mass confusing text. And miraculously though, during this project, I found that I was able to effectively retell this event using a minimal amount of sentences in my final, because I was able to pinpoint the most important parts and then utilize advanced vocabulary to help further explain what I was writing. So, for example, in one of the sentences I picked from the rough draft, I said, "Across the water, one of our submarines forced the Japanese fleet to change direction to evade the threat, and in turtle as two of the Jap ships collide with each other." In the revised version, I say, "Changing direction upon the threat of a U.S. submarine, two Japanese ships collide, and I chortle at their idiocy." See, this sentence, I was able to pinpoint the important areas of the event and keep them. And along with being able to minimize my writing, this helped my writing to achieve a more fluid sort of, it made my writing more fluid. And instead of making the end product all awkward and forced, it sounded as if there was a flow to my writing.
Poised calmly, my last opponent almost seemed regal. It wasn't until I saw her face that her illusion of elegance shattered. It was me. Disbelief coursed through my veins as she opened her mouth and spoke. For every time you called yourself incapable and forced yourself to believe that you are inadequate, for every time you've minimized yourself because you were too much of a coward to even have an ounce of faith in yourself, it bars you from your true objective. This is your true enemy.
So throughout the MPX year, I feel that I was able to gain a lot more self-confidence concerning my oral communication. And beginning the year, or prior to beginning MPX, I really hated group discussions because a lot of times I would just sit there and stay quiet. And Socratic circles were really tedious and intimidating to participate in and when I did participate in Socratic circles, I would begin what I was going to say with "sorry," and then I would continue to hunch over and make these erratic hand motions, and it looked really terrible. And this was because I held onto this mentality, which constantly claimed that I would be better if I just kept my mouth shut, since whatever I had to say was probably unimportant, or that my presence in a group was insignificant. Remember how I talked about minimizing my opinions and thoughts in one of my previous slides? However, near the end of the year, I found significant changes in my character. For example, twice our group needed to explain our hydroponic system to people who were who we needed to impress. We had to explain it to a director of the school and also a hydroponic system expert. So of course, the pressure was on to sort of leave a good impression. So when I was doing this, instead of slouching and whispering to the floor, I was able to vocalize my thoughts with conviction and understanding. And again, we needed to speak in front of a crowd during the MP Iron Chef event. And while I felt a bit shaken before and after speaking, I was really proud of myself because while I was speaking, I was still able to keep my voice fluent and level, even though I felt really shaky inside, and that's what made me feel proud of myself.
Suddenly, I grasped the object, which held the fate of my future and the future of everything around me. Flustered, I lifted it off the pedestal which it previously resided so comfortably upon. Fear caused the tips of my fingers to tingle, as if every cell, no, every atom was dancing with delight and anticipation. This was it. This was the prophesied moment, the catalyst to the desired outcome. What little breath I could manage quivered slightly at the edges of my lips, and the unexpected crushing weight of the anxiety which had always flooded through me at such great moments like these, left me